Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Sudan takes a step towards stability in the signing of the beginning of a power-sharing deal between protesters and the ruling military council. Details still need to be threshed out and divisions remain. Also, 4 months after a fatal cyclone devastated central Mozambique, the UN's calling for more help from the international community to help raise the estimated billions needed for reconstruction. And Nigeria are taking on Tunisia in the Africa Cup of Nations third-place playoff. The Super Eagles are the favourites to win bronze. Despite a disappointing loss against Algeria in the semi-finals, the score currently stands at 1-0 to Nigeria. But first, in Sudan, civilian protest leaders and the Transitional Military Council have signed a political accord that outlines a power-sharing deal. But the battle is not over. The two sides still have to settle on the more delicate details of a constitutional agreement that's meant to tackle the division of power. Nevertheless, Wednesday is a step in the transition to civilian rule, in the wake of the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir back in April. Protesters had kept up rallies demanding the end of the military leadership that took over. And in June, security forces were accused of killing 128 people in a crackdown. Wednesday's agreement has been welcomed, but has come at a high price.
The Sudanese people are happy today, and I hope the Forces for Declaration of Freedom and Change continue to honor the death of our martyred brothers who died in the protests.
We are not fully satisfied with this agreement, and we consider it incomplete because it doesn't include the rights of the martyrs and Sudanese people who died in the sit-in. It has no value for us, but it is a step forward in order for Sudan to move on.
This agreement meets the aspiration of the Sudanese people, and I wish that Sudan would move on for prosperity and for development.
Well, Naba Mohideen's in Sudan. She tells us more about the details of the political accord.
Actually, the accord is about how the 3-year transitional period will be governed. It's about the governing structures of the three councils suggested and agreed: the Sovereign Council and the Ministers' Council and the Legislative. The two sides agreed on 5+5+1 structure regarding the members of the Sovereign Council. The 5 from military and 5 civilians, and the head of the Sovereign Council will be a civilian with a military background. And the other thing is they also agreed on legislative council with 67% for FFC, which is the opposition coalition, and 33% for the other forces. So this is the political accord agreed on Wednesday.
Now, there's a lot that's in there that was already brought up in previous negotiations. Are protesters satisfied with the political draft? Did they have to give away too much?
Actually, the protesters are not satisfied, and there is no reactions in the streets as it was when they announced the agreement on July the 5th. Because people are waiting for the constitutional draft as it will preserve their rights, and we'll talk about the freedoms on the transitional period, and it's also it's about the immunity, which was asked by TMC. So people are not very happy with the political agreement because they think that it took a very long time to agree on, because it's the same agreement before June the 3rd. And the other thing is it's a political one. It didn't talk. It didn't talk about the rights and also the investigation of the June 3rd event. So there is no reaction in Khartoum Street, which was flooded before, with the protesters were happy with the announcement itself before they signed on the agreement.
Now, the second part of this accord is due to come. Talks for the constitutional draft are meant to start on Friday. What are some of the biggest issues to be settled by those talks?
the biggest issue is the authorities will be given by for the Sovereign Council, and the relationship between the three councils, who is going to appoint who and who's going to exempt who from service. And the other thing is the immunity issue, because opposition groups and protesters cannot negotiate on the immunity by anyhow for the people who will be convicted to crimes, especially killing the protesters in June 3rd and the following days of the protest. So the main two issues are the immunity for TMC members in the Sovereign Council, and the other thing is the authorities of the Sovereign Council and the relationship between the authorities, between the three councils together in the ministries and the Legislative Council.
Naba Mahideen there for us in Khartoum. And Nigeria has won third place in the Africa Cup of Nations after beating Tunisia 1-0 on Wednesday evening. The Super Eagles delighted fans from the outset after scoring a goal in the third minute. They had been the favourites to win bronze despite a disappointing loss against Algeria in the semi-finals. So our Simon Harding is in Egypt. He was following the game for us. Simon, so the game started not that long ago. Our fans, the Super Eagles took off pretty early. Are fans pleased with their third placement?
Yeah, the game finished just a few seconds ago, actually, Nigeria winning the 8th third-place playoff. They've yet to be beaten in that playoff, so it is a good result for Gernot Rohr and the Super Eagles who record their best finish in the competition since they won the Africa Cup of Nations back in 2013. It was, to be honest, quite a difficult game to follow because the goal came from Odion Igalo in the third minute, as you said. Odion Igalo, who becomes the best scorer in the competition, who extends his scoring tally to 5 goals, even though the Nigerian striker went off just before half-time. But the game was really symptomatic of a third-place playoff, tired players, tired legs. Mostly you could tell that the players were almost already on holiday mentally and physically. This was perhaps a game too much for them in the stadium. It was the same thing. The Nigerian fans made most of the noise, even though there wasn't plenty of them there in the stadium to cheer on their team. But of course, it's a good finish for Nigeria in this Africa Cup of Nations, and it bodes well for the future, with a very young team, with the likes of Chukwueze, who plays in La Liga, who are going to be able to lead this team in the future. And, of course, the next Africa Cup of Nations, which is just 2 years away. It's a very different summary for Tunisia, the Eagles of Carthage, who've had a very disappointing campaign. Of course, they made it to the semi-finals, but a lot of people wondered how they made it that far. And, again, tonight's performance was one where the Tunisians really lacked the effort needed to win a game of football, and that's been the story of their competition, Georgia. But really a big congratulations to the Super Eagles who have got the job done and who have recorded a third-place finish for the 8th time here at the Africa Cup of Nations.
Thanks very much, Simon. So as I said, Simon was following the game for us in Egypt, but we also had Sam Olakoya, who was watching the match in Abuja. He joins us now. Sam, how are you feeling? How closely was this tournament followed in Nigeria?
Yeah, it was very well, or it's still been full. It's very well followed because Nigeria is a football-loving country. There are 2 important things in Nigeria: football and religion. So when you have big tournaments happening, especially when Nigeria is participating, people always, especially the men, always want to follow. At a time like this, the women would say the men normally come late, spending late hours watching football. So as for today's, this night's event, I think most Nigerians will be very, very happy about it. The coach himself said our target is getting to the semi-finals. He never said we'll emerge to. So it's better than what the coach anticipated for us. So people are definitely happy. The boys will come back with something. At least they performed better than the champions. They performed better than the hosts. So I think it's something to be happy about.
Thanks very much, Samuel Okoye. Congratulations for the Super Eagles' third placement in the Africa Cup of Nations. In other news, 4 months ago, a powerful cyclone devastated central Mozambique. Hundreds of people were killed. Communities are still struggling to rebuild their lives, and the UN's called for more help from the international community in raising the estimated $3.1 billion needed for reconstruction. Nicolas Chemin has the story.
In March, Cyclone Idai devastated the town of Beira and much of central Mozambique. It was one of the worst storms on record in the country. 4 months later, Beira residents like Lorinda are still struggling.
The house was ripped apart. The iron roof was damaged. We were later able to repair it. Before that, we were not able to sleep. Whenever it rained, we couldn't sleep. We would stay up all together.
Her daughter Teresa has had to give up her old job.
I'm making these donuts to help support the family so that we can eat, because none of us has a job. I used to have a hair salon. That's where I used to make money. But now, with the current situation, it doesn't help. I need to pay for water, food, the children.
Most roofs, including the one on the local school, have not yet been repaired.
When there's sun, we study like this. But when it rains, we go home.
46,000 Beira residents now live in resettlement camps. Some have been given small plots of land to grow vegetables.
I always wanted to have a piece of land and a home. That was my dream. I would like to have a house for my family so that we are safe. That's the thing I want the most. I cry a lot. I used to pray to God for a piece of land.
In all, the cyclone killed 1,000 people in 3 countries, Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe. The UN is worried. Its emergency appeal for Mozambique received less than half of the $282 million it was requesting.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
They're known for their cuisine and saying hello with a kiss. They only work 35 hours per week, when they're not on strike, that is. How true are these clichés about France? Every week, Florence Villeminot tears apart stereotypes. Join us for insight into French culture and current events to understand what makes the French so unique.
French Connections, presented by Florence Villeminot on France 24 and France24.com.